Okay, so up next we have Lara from the Womanhood.
Hi, ladies. Oh, it's been such a beautiful event and so amazing to hear so many beautiful women speak. So I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Lara Beidou, Lara Akua Beidou. My father is West African Ghanaian, we're from the Fanti tribe, and my mother is English and Scandinavian. I was born in Sydney, Australia, and I grew up in the United States, in California, then in Jersey City, New Jersey, and finally in Philadelphia. When I was 19, I then moved back to Australia, and I really then began to see and have what I would call would be the crisis. It's one of those crises that I think we all kind of have experienced at different points. For me, I always knew when I was a little girl that I was Ghanaian and I was Australian. My mother was New Zealander. And that was always taught to me where my countries are from. However, I didn't have a relationship with my father. So I had no connection to my West African heritage. And I did what any child would do, trying to navigate themselves on the other side of the world. I adopted myself, and I kind of fell into African American culture and began to identify as Black. When I was going through Black, I kind of always had this feeling like, you know, I know I'm biracial. I know that I have two races, but I feel Black because when I go down the street, nobody asks me, oh, where are you from? They're not asking me, oh, what white are you? They're saying, what type of Black are you? Where's your brown from? What is that looking like for you? And when I was younger, I kind of just was proud of it, to be honest. I was proud of my color. I was the only person in my family that had some color, and I was taught that that was a beautiful thing, as best that my white family could do for me. It wasn't until I got back to Sydney, Australia, that I experienced really for the first time what my experience of racism looked like. Now, think about that. I spent from the time I was 5 to the time I was 18 years old in the United States of America, and it is not until I was in the suburbs of Sydney, Australia, that I experienced direct racism. That, for me, kind of blew my mind. After my entire life in other countries, I was Australian. I was Australian first, then I was Black. But it wasn't until I was back home in this supposed home that I had been told was my home, and felt so othered and felt so alone and felt so alienated that it felt like for the first time, not only did I not have a home, I didn't know who I was or where I was from. I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know what identity I was supposed to be having, nor did I understand the identity that I wanted to claim. I was so angry. I was so angry. And I remember being 19 years old and going out trying to find friends after having all Black friends in America, trying to scrape together whatever friends I could, and going out with these 3 blonde girls. And we went out on Mardi Gras, and we went to Home nightclub down in Darling Harbour, and the guy let all 3 of those girls in, and he turned to me and he said, $10. And I was like, what? You just let them all in for free? What do you mean, $10? It was like a smack in the face. It was like I don't understand what's happening, and at the same time, I don't get really what's happening for me right now. Over the next 4 years, I did what I thought was the best thing for me to do. I went to school, I studied, I worked, and I stayed in my room, and I kept the door closed and the windows closed, and I sat in that same energy of depression and sadness and grief and loss. I went home that night and I told my family what happened, and they said, don't you think you're just being a little bit sensitive? Are you sure that that's actually what happened for you? I was alone. I felt alone. Because not even my own family, not even the blood, could understand what was happening for me in this moment. You know, I study counseling now, and I've been in what you call deep therapeutic healing for 10 years when I entered back into therapy when I was 19 years old. And there's a word for it. It's called minority stress. When the stress of your blackness and your brownness leads to mental unwellness. It is a thing. It is a real thing. And it took me 4 years of sitting in mental unwellness before I came out and could see the light. So what I did is I got my degree, I went around the world, I chucked my deuces up, and I went back to America. And I was in New York City for 2 years at the time when Eric Garner, who was a black man who was killed by the police, all of New York City was raising up. There were protests of tens of thousands of people going past my window as I was working, trying to make it because New York's hard. And I was in the middle of this chanting, this Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And I'm thinking, yeah, they do fucking matter. And this is a real thing. This is not something where I'm just not being let in, because we are dying. We are being killed. And we not only that, we don't know where to go, and we don't know who we are, because we have been systematically removed from ourselves. Not only from our geographic location, but from our spirits. It's a return home. The healing and the path of healing is a return to yourself. It is a return to the spirit. It is return back to who you already are, that has never left and could never leave. And one thing that I began to realize in the midst of all of this thing was that the layers and the complexity and the challenges, I kind of woke up then and realized, what, I really identify with this, but I'm not African American. I grew up here, I sympathize, but my father is West African. I know where he's from. It wasn't until I finally came home 2 years later and I sat my dad down on the bench and I said, Dad, why weren't you there for me? Why didn't you call on birthdays? Why didn't you teach me gunning? What happened for that split to be there? And he said what he said. But what he did was show up. And I cried and I cried, and my dad sat on the bench with me, and for the first time, the little 6-year-old girl that was lost had finally gotten what she wanted, and there was a healing. There was a connection. And then I could turn to myself and turn to my spirit and say, I'm ancestors. I am ready to know you. I'm ready to know who you are, and I'm ready for you to tell me who I am. The journey of an identity and being a biracial woman of white heritage essentially was about reconciling for me the split between being part colonizer and part colonized. It was reconciling and loving both parts of myself and standing firm and true in my truth despite what my friends, what my family would think and say, despite the microaggressions, keyword, despite the indirect racism and the subtleties that life throws at you as a woman of color. I haven't even touched on the woman part yet. But I just want to say, in terms of all the women here today, there is an inbuilt spirit of strength and softness and raw energy that comes from women. It is something that cannot be duplicated. It is something that cannot be manufactured. People try. They sell. They make millions of dollars trying to create black womanhood. All the time, we are trying to get back to what black womanhood is for us. The answers are not outside of ourselves. They're not in the experiences that we have. They're not in the relationships that we have. They're not really even in the geographic locations of where we're going. For me, for my story, for what I realized, all I had to do was turn my gaze inward, to reflect on myself, to see my beauty and my complexity and my layers and my nuances, to see all of what made me a woman, and not to throw or discard anything, not even my whiteness. but to bring it all together so that I could be a full woman, a whole woman of color. That's the journey of healing. It's the journey of wholeness. It's the journey towards becoming who you already are. It's challenging and it's scary and it's something that is forever changing. This idea of identity, who am I, if I were to ask you that question now? But I'm sure all the mothers in the room have a different answer. I'm sure the grandmothers in the room have a different answer. Identity is fluid. It is not moved. It is not a solid, static thing. It will evolve and it will change as you grow and as you move and as you experience life, as life is reflected back to you through your own gaze. And my wish for everyone here today, for me sharing my story, is firstly, thank you, gratitude, for the space that you have created so that I could share with you. And for my wish for everybody is that you continue on this journey. If you're here for a reason. You're doing the work. People don't just come on a Saturday to a women empowerment if you're not ready to do the work, if you're not already on your journey. Thank you.